We wanted it to be fair, not according to Washington's definition of fair, but Webster's definition of fair, which means everybody gets treated the same. That's fair.
But then Herman Cain spent the day explaining how everyone doesn't get treated the same, how some individual taxpayers would be treated differently, and how some businesses would be treated differently in the tax code, in the Herman Cain tax code, kind of like the way the tax code is now tailored to the different circumstances of different taxpayers. Herman Cain's Keep It Simple plan of taxation is already starting to develop some complications.
If you add or below the poverty level, your plan isn't 999, it's 909. Say amen, y'all. Amen. 909. In other words, if you are at or below the poverty level based upon family size, because there's a different number for each one, then you don't pay that middle 9 tax on your income. This is how we help the poor.
So now, not everyone will have a 9% income tax rate as previously advertised. Now, a family of 4 making $22,000 a year or less would have a 0% federal income tax rate under Herman Cain's plan, which happens to be exactly what their income tax rate is right now, which Herman Cain obviously does not know. But that family of 4 with an income of $22,000 a year or less also received an earned income tax credit worth thousands of dollars, which Herman Cain would take away from them. He would take that money right out of the working poor's pockets so that rich people can pay much, much lower taxes. Having ripped that money out of the poor's pockets, Herman Cain would then take more money away from them on every dollar they spent. The Herman Cain tax would take 9 cents of every spent dollar because the working poor spend all of their income. Herman Cain would, through his sales tax, be hitting them with a 9% federal tax on all of their income. That currently does not exist. Herman Cain thinks he's come up with another idea that will help the poor, which involves a serious complication to the first 9 of his 999 plan, the 9% business tax.
Right now, on the first 9, you can deduct purchases if you're a business. You can deduct capital expenditures, net exports. But for those cities that qualify as opportunity zones, you will also be able to deduct a certain amount of your payroll expenses. So you will be incented to put people to work. It just doesn't apply to certain kinds of businesses located in the zone. All businesses would qualify for those kinds of extra exemptions.
And there's the magic word, exemption. Herman Cain is now writing exemptions and complications into the 999 very simple plan. Businesses would pay different tax rates depending on where they located. Businesses would be allowed different deductions depending on where they located. That has been written into the tax code for years, called at various times enterprise zones or empowerment zones. What Herman Cain is discovering is that taxation is complicated for a very simple reason. Making the tax code fair in an extremely complex, advanced economy is an extremely complex exercise. Of course there should be different tax rates for poor people, and of course there should be different tax rates for rich people, and yet a different tax rate for middle-class people, and there should be reasonably conceived deductions and exemptions in personal income taxation, and there must be full tax deductibility for reasonable business expenses for business to even be able to define profit, never mind make a profit. Herman Cain's tax plan does not allow businesses to deduct their single biggest expense, salaries, payroll expenses. You cannot calculate the profit of a business without accounting for the biggest expense in a business. Herman Cain would only allow a business to deduct some payroll expenses, and we have no idea how much of the payroll expenses, but some payroll expenses if and only if the business is located in one of his opportunity zones. This is the most anti-business proposal ever made by a major presidential candidate. That it is made by one of the presidential candidates who claims his qualification for the presidency is that he is a businessman strikes a note of absurdity never before heard on a presidential debate stage. All you would have to do to get all Republicans, including Herman Cain, to recognize the absurdity of everything Herman Cain is saying about taxes is to simply have a Democrat, any Democrat, say exactly the same thing. Joining me now is Robert Reich, former labor secretary in the Clinton administration. He's now a professor of public policy at the University of California at Berkeley and the author of Aftershock. Thank you very much for joining me tonight, Bob.
Good evening, Lawrence.
Bob, the reason I keep coming back to the 999 plan is that it is absurd throughout. At every stage, it is absurd. But it is a version of an old Republican and kind of honored Republican idea in many circles, the flat tax. And all of these flat tax proposals in the past, in the present, what is surely to be Rick Perry's flat tax proposal, we're told is coming up, they're all filled with the problems exemplified by Herman Cain's 999 plan, aren't they?
Well, they are all fraudulent. I mean, the flat tax is a fraud. Let's be very clear about this on two grounds. One ground you've already talked about, Lawrence, and that is that inevitably there are going to be exemptions and there are going to be deductions just simply because life is complicated and people are complicated, businesses are complicated, and to get fairness, you're going to have them. But secondly, because if you have a flat tax, you are inevitably going to reduce the taxes of people at the top who, in a progressive tax system, are supposed to pay a little bit more, and you're going to increase the taxes of people at the bottom who either pay no tax now or pay a very little tax or get some sort of exemption. No, they would be paying 9% or whatever the flat tax rate is. And this is known. I mean, the independent, nonpartisan Center for Tax Policy recently investigated the Cain plan and found that poor people would be paying a lot more and rich people would be paying a lot less in taxes. I mean, it is not only absurd, but it's been over and over again being utilized by Republicans. In fact, Rick Perry is going to come out with his flat tax plan next week. It's been utilized by Republicans to disguise what's really going on, which is a transfer of income and wealth to the very top. Exactly what we've seen going on in America for years.
And no Republican in the presidential campaign has a problem with that. The only problem they have is, hey, Herman, we don't want a new 9% sales tax, but none of them are going after the flat tax, income tax portion of it, because that's something, actually, if they all got a chance to do, they would all be inclined to do.
Oh, of course, of course. You know what I hope Democrats begin to say with regard to tax reform is that what we really need, given that so much income and wealth is now going to the very top 1%, I mean, we have double what we had only 30 years ago. 30 years ago, about 10% of total income went to the top 1%. Now, more than 20% of total income goes to the top 1%. And their income taxes, their tax rates, their marginal tax rates are lower than they've been in 30 years. And we have a big debt. I mean, the logic would suggest that we raise taxes on the very top, have more tax brackets, and we treat all sources of income, including capital gains. You know, that's one of the big loopholes. Capital gains have been taxed at 15%. We treat all taxes and all capital gains and all sources of income exactly the same. That would be real tax reform.
Yeah, I have been an all income is income guy ever since I took my first economics course. Why we distinguish capital gains, which requires no labor, and we in effect honor the earnings of capital through the tax code more than we honor the earnings of labor through our tax code.
Lawrence, it's absurd. The 400 richest families in America, the last time the IRS measured them, the 400 richest families that actually are sitting on a total wealth that is greater than the total wealth of the bottom 150 million families and have huge incomes, they're paying at a 17% rate on average. 17% because of those capital gains. You know, if you start looking at this thing, you see that even the current system is so regressive. It is not progressive. Poor people are paying huge shares of their income in Social Security payroll taxes and sales taxes. It's unfair.
Former Labor Secretary Robert Reich, thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Thanks, Lawrence.